Tonight on a live edition of the Carolina Weather Group, with thousands of acres burning in California, could wildfires like this happen here in the Carolinas? And what are the weather conditions that makes fire spread so prime? We examine the conditions, wind, temperature, and humidity that are needed and do make fires so devastating. Plus, key research being conducted right here in the Carolinas to help keep people safe across the country and around the world. We revisit the studies of IBHS, and some of the coldest air of the season is coming our way. Could it return snow to the Carolinas? We're going to take an early look at the forecast on this Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. Streaming live on Facebook and YouTube and across the network of the Carolina Weather Group, I'm James Brierton in Charlotte, welcoming in our panel, Jared Smith in Charleston, South Carolina, Frank Strait in Columbia, South Carolina, and Tom Miner with me here in Charlotte. Hello to you guys. It's good to see everybody. As we begin the show this week, we are looking at new video out of California as thousands of acres continue to burn. People still evacuated from their homes, and too many people have found out that they have lost their homes due to ongoing wildfires spread and started by massive winds like we have not seen in some time. In tonight's conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about the remarkable winds that kickstarted this fire just a week ago and is once again making headlines tonight. And the question of whether or not we could see repeat fires here in the Carolinas. This is video of wildfires that we have seen in recent years in the Carolinas. It has happened and will happen again. So how do we prepare? That's where folks like IBHS are coming in to focus to help us prepare and better stay safe. Jared, let me start with you because you not only have family in California, but you were with us for what at the time was a celebration of our 500th episode of the Carolina Weather Group. But we got to see remarkable science being done at IBHS. So what do you see now when you look at video from Los Angeles after visiting and seeing that science happen in Chester County, South Carolina?
So, I mean, I think we were talking about this just before we started, but we were, if you remember that 500th episode, we were like, wow, this is insane at 35 miles an hour. And then you get to 60, 70, 80 sustained with the Santa Ana winds. And that is a whole other level of scary. We were very concerned that, we were watching for that, if you'll recall from that episode, we were watching for that fire to jump from the first house to the second house. Never did at 35 with the spacing they had. They implement these things here. They build to these things. And in this particular case, I mean, when you're dealing with Santa Ana's 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, I saw gusts to 89, saw gusts to 90.
Hurricane force.
I mean, that's just, I saw somebody describe it as a fire hurricane, and
sure,
honestly, not the worst description I've heard. Right down to the picture of the palm tree, but instead of driving rain, it was driving literally embers, sparks, flames. Very scary situation, but that's why they do this. That's why IBHS does this, is for situations just like this, to learn in a controlled environment to how to improve upon, unfortunately, what we have seen here. But this is an extreme that is, Santa Ana's get pretty bad, from experience, with my family thankfully they're further south in San Diego. But this doesn't get, it doesn't crank up like this that often.
And it doesn't get much worse than this. This is some of the worst we've seen. We're going to have Frank in a few minutes remind us what exactly creates those Santa Ana winds. But before we get too far into this, Jared was just talking about our visit to IBHS, the Insurance Institute of Business, Home, and Safety, right here in South Carolina, where CAL FIRE and Caltech came out in September. And in case you haven't seen our 500th episode yet, take a look at a clip from our episode. And again, as Jared mentioned, this is just 35 mile per hour winds, and it was amazing.
There goes
and
the
scary
house.
to see.
You can see the corner of the house here has ignited. So just inside these big hangar doors, that is the lab that IBHS has used. You've seen the footage before. That's where they build the homes, that they test the hurricane. We can just hear now, the winds are cranking up. The fans are cranking up. The fire is raging. They were not kidding when they said it was going to get very hot right here. Dan and I both going in, I think, to pull our cameras back. I like to go home with my camera at the end of the day. Everyone here has just taken huge steps back, because as those fans cranked up, so did the fire. So they are doing this experiment like all the experiments they do here at IBHS with safety in mind. They've got the Richburg Fire Department standing by in case any part of this experiment got out of control. So far, it has managed to stay contained to the structures being used inside this experiment. My phone now telling me, this is no joke, the device is too hot and the quality of my recording may be diminished as the phone's trying to cool itself down.
Wow, that's impressive.
And it certainly was impressive. And you heard us in that clip talking about how impressive those winds were. You could actually see them at the time being blown over. And again, that was just 35 miles per hour winds. Here's more of what Candace Jordan was thinking as she was watching all
I
of
think that was one thing
take
that was
place
so
just this past
impressive. You know,
September.
they had lit the pallets, they were going for a little bit, but really when they kicked up those winds, that's when the heat just blasted us. Like, you could tell, like, it went from, you know, this level all the way up to this level. Like, it was amazing to see that difference.
Just as we were standing here continuing to watch the fire burn, we watched this one section of the first structure fall off and blow in the wind and just scoot to the base of the second structure. So we are watching anxiously to see if that will be the moment that the second structure catches fire, thanks to the wind carrying that from one building to the next. You can actually see a second piece now blowing in between the two structures. Again, the fans here at IBHS cranking out of their wind tunnel at about 35 miles an hour to simulate what is a very real and very scary experience during wildfire season in so much of the country.
So why do they do this? Why does IBHS build a whole home and then light it on fire?
What is it
Here's
that
what
you
their
guys are
director
looking
of
at here as
research
we
told
wait
us.
for this to spread?
Sure. So what we're looking at is we're looking at how this ignites the actual structure and how the fire actually progresses through the actual structure from this external ignition scenario. And we're looking at how different ignition mechanisms can change the exposure that downstream building will see.
What are some of the weather factors that are being simulated here to help learn about how things would work in the real world?
Number one is a wind-driven fire spread. So our fans allow us to look at different wind speeds to really mimic what fires would experience in the real world, rather than just an ambient condition where the wind isn't blowing. And how does that actually bend over the flames and change the amount of radiant heat and direct flame contact that structure would experience?
So we have a QR code for you on the screen right now. Also a link in comments if you want to go watch our 500th episode. It was just an incredible experience to go out there to Chester County and witness this science firsthand. And as Jared mentioned, that second home never caught fire. They had spaced them out far enough that even at 35 miles with ash and debris blowing towards that second structure, it did not catch. And that's part of what the science was all about, was just trying to determine the spacing between homes to help keep them safe from 35 mile per hour winds. That all goes into encouraging and guiding building codes. But Frank, what was it with these Santa Ana winds that helped drive them up to hurricane force in California over the past week?
Well, it was an unusual situation where we had a very strong area of high pressure built into the Great Basin, and a storm. It was actually the storm that eventually brought us our winter weather here to the Carolinas, sitting over northwestern Mexico. Let me go to the screen share here, James, and I will call up the weather map from the day that the Santa Ana winds were raging back in Southern California. And you can see the situation here. We had surface high pressure roughly here over the Great Basin region. And at the same time, our storm was sitting down here over northwestern Mexico. There's an area low pressure at the surface down here. Note that there is a strong pressure difference between that area of high pressure. It's about 1,040 millibars, sea level adjusted pressure here, about 1,008 here. That's a big pressure difference. About 32 millibars between the two. So, as you probably know, air wants to go from high pressure to low pressure. That's what it wants to do. But then there's what it actually does. Instead of going in a straight line like that, because of the Coriolis effect, it goes more like that and like that in from high to low pressure. And so you end up having the wind blowing and the air rushing over those mountains in Southern California, the mountain ranges, the San Bernardinos, San Gabriels, San Monicas, and so forth, that down there. And that motion of the air over the mountains, it's a dry wind for one thing, and then the downsloping effect also typically makes a Santa Ana wind a warm wind. So you have very low relative humidity. And those strong winds, they're accelerated through mountain gaps and through passes and canyons in that region that are parallel to the wind. And sort of like the same wind tunnel effect that you get in a major city between the buildings. If you spend any time in uptown Charlotte on a windy day, you'll understand what I'm talking about there. And you can even get that effect in the smaller cities too, but especially when you have larger buildings. But anyway, those winds, because the air has to kind of rush between those canyons and mountain passes, that gets accelerated. And that's how you get the strong winds. Now, the winds and the dry air alone don't cause fires. It's a extremely favorable environment for fires to grow rapidly and spread and to develop quickly, but that isn't actually what caused the fire. That's caused typically by people, a person doing something foolish, like parking their car over dry grass and leaves or something like that, and the catalytic converter really hot, and that sparks a fire, or they're careless with a cigarette, or they're a criminal and start a fire. That's how you get the fires going. But in this type of environment, it has the potential for those fires to become catastrophic because they spread rapidly and grow rapidly.
Yeah, I think you hit on a key point there. It's like we don't know yet really what ignited the fire at the start, but it's this weather that helped really fuel it. And I'm so glad you talked about the Santa Ana winds and also, of course, the very unique terrain with the mountains there. Here in the Carolina Weather Group, 2 years ago, we had a chance to talk with Adam Warwick, who at the time was the fire project manager for the Nature Conservancy of North Carolina. And Frank, I think he kind of picks up a little bit of what you were just talking about when he was telling us then at the time, kind of those ideal atmospheric conditions, both for wildfires and also prescribed fires.
So
Let's go back to
then
the archive.
behind
Take a
that
listen.
front, as you know, we get those dry northerly winds and the unstable atmosphere, and the really when the atmosphere is unstable, it can cause a dramatic fire behavior, really erratic fire behavior, because you got that vertical lift. When we're doing a prescribed fire, we look for those days, because our biggest challenge to prescribed fire is the smoke management. So we need higher transport winds and higher mixing height. If you go over to the wildfire side, then going in the briefing that morning, hey, that front came through and it didn't give us any rain last night, so be on your toes. And what that means then is, Mr. Johnson, it was Sunday, and he was burning leaves in his backyard. And, it was kind of damp out, so it's no big deal. And then that front comes through Sunday night. He goes to work the next morning and thinks his fire's out. But then those winds kick up 15, 20 miles an hour, and your humidity might get down into 20% is really low for us. So, but when it gets down there, that's when overall your dry pattern has those leaves, which is our main fuel. It dries those out really quick. The more open the woods are, the faster it dries. The more closed and dense and shaded, the longer it takes for those fuels to dry out. But it's a mixture. It's that combination of high pressure, vertical lift, low humidity, and winds 10 to 15 miles an hour with, if you mix in like these 25, 30 mile an hour gusts, that's enough to stoke a fire and get it going. And so then, we roll out, we try to suppress a fire. The fire department's first on the scene, and in the mountains, the challenge we have is that fire burns really fast uphill, faster than you can catch it almost by running, if you were able to run up the hill. And so we arrive, and that fire is generally running uphill. And as flames go uphill, they're bent over, as you know, and so that preheats the vegetation and the fuels above it, such that it escalates in intensity until it reaches the ridgetop. And when it reaches the ridgetop, it can be in the treetops.
We're glad Adam Warwick there came on with us previously here in the Carolina Weather Group to help describe fire and what they battle. His description there of chasing it up the hilltop, I thought was quite memorable. At the time, Frank asked him about prescribed burns, which are a good thing and help manage the ecosystem.
When
Here's what he had to
conditions
say
you're
about
looking
that at the
for
time.
to do a prescribed burn?
Well, our best months of the year are February, March, and April. I think April's the best and most favorable. We get these days where it's humidity's in the 20s and we've got a little bit of breeze to help us out, but a lot of times it's not too crazy of a breeze. And then in the fall, in the dry period, when the leaves are coming off, the thing that carries our fire in the understory is hardwood leaf litter. And so when it's fresh, before it's been compacted by the snow over the winter, fall burning is really great.
And as he mentioned, they're going to be coming into a prescribed burn season here in the next little bit, and that will hopefully help head off fires like these. I think this is Pilot Mountain video from years past, if I'm not mistaken. We know we've had them in the foothills of North Carolina. You guys might remember the show there. Scotty Powell was out there live, out there near Marion, North Carolina. And of course, we have the after effects of Helene. So much downed vegetation, trees and otherwise, across western North Carolina and portions of upstate South Carolina. Fires are something that I think are very much on our mind. Frank, you said something that I thought was real interesting. Last week, these fires kick off near Los Angeles, the low pressure system dancing with the high pressure system. Then eventually that low comes this way, and we dance with winter weather here in the South. This week, the winds have kicked back up in Los Angeles. Not as high as they were last week, but still high enough that they're a problem. And again, that low pressure system is going to slide on over, and we're going to dance with winter weather again. In a moment, I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether or not we're going to get any snow and any winter weather. That's coming away in probably about 5 minutes here on the Carolina Weather Group. But before we do that, I want to give IBHS a moment to talk about one other piece of research they have done there in the past. Again, right here in our own backyard in Chester County, South Carolina. Ian Giamenko, who's been on with us time and time again, a friend of the show, talking about hail research and otherwise, also joined us once to talk about not only the spacing between buildings, but also the spacing in that vegetation. Fire breaks where there's no trees, there's no bushes. Here's what they learned about fire
What we're actually doing is testing fire spread and fuel breaks. So essentially the gaps that not only that fire and hand crews cut around fire lines around large wildfires, but also that we use in landscaping and land use planning to see how big do these gaps have to be when fire is progressing through fine fuels. So for us, we used it in some of the work that we did just the other day. We're using beds of pine needles as our fine dried fuel. And what you see is fire under wind conditions, the flame that actually tilts down, and that's what actually kind of jumps the fuel bed. Now there's the ember problem as well, but what we're trying to see is how do we stop the flaming front of the fire using fuel breaks? So essentially gaps. And so we had instrumented these gaps, used different distances the other day in our work. We had gravel that was our gap between one fuel bed and then the target fuel bed. And what you do see under wind conditions, the flames tilt over, and as soon as they touch that volatile fuel on the other side, they could ignite. And there's a certain distance in which the flames can do that. And it is remarkable to watch. The the spread over just say 40 feet of fire in under a minute, under just 20, 30 mile per hour wind conditions in our test chamber. And so there's a couple different applications. There's the application for fire services and understanding under what conditions, how big does the fuel break, does the gap, does the fire line have to be? And then there's the other land use, landscaping side of things.
So we've got all those videos over on our YouTube channel. And again, he's mentioning 20, 30 mile per hour winds. And you can see in that video how the wind is leaning that fire over and causing it to spread. And again, Los Angeles seeing winds 2 or 3 times faster. Frank, my memory goes back to one of the biggest fires we had here in the Southeast, not in the Carolinas, but just in neighboring Tennessee, in Gatlinburg. What do you remember about that one?
Well, I remember that the situation was a lot like what you would get in a Santa Ana wind event, and that the winds were blowing through the mountains, and there was a drought ongoing at the time. So we weren't really as dry as it gets in Southern California in this part of the country, but it was pretty darn dry. And we have a lot more fuel in that the forests are a little bit more dense in this part of the country, and there's a lot more leaves laying around on the ground. So when it gets really dry like that, you have a lot of fuel available. Now, the situation was that we had a high wind event as well going on in the Southern Appalachians, and there was a fire that I'm pretty sure was, if I remember correctly, was started by arsonists a few days before the wind started, and they weren't able to contain it before the winds really picked up. James, if you'll switch over to my screen share again, I have another weather map here from that event. This is the evening of November 28th of 2016. So we had a big storm in the nation's midsection and a fairly strong area of high pressure off the East Coast, maybe a little off the map here, but or right on the edge. But the winds, again, blowing between these two weather systems out of the high and into the low because of the Coriolis effect, go kind of like that with the green arrow. So that's kind of the way the wind's blowing. And notice how close the isobars are together. That means you have a steep pressure gradient, which means the winds want to go fast. And any mountain gaps you have in the area, the wind will rush through those faster. And so you end up with those strong winds that got that fire out of control and blew it right into Gatlinburg. Yeah. And so that's how they ended up with the extreme wildfire activity in and around the Gatlinburg area that ended up being catastrophic for them.
Yeah, I remember where I was. I was actually traveling, trying to find it on TV and actually getting frustrated that I couldn't. Unlike when a fire breaks out in Los Angeles in front of thousands of TV cameras, it seems like being like, what is happening in Gatlinburg? This is such a key place. So many people obviously vacation there here in the Carolinas, and it's so interesting to see the connection with weather and fire and how all those things play together. Frank, you mentioned as you were talking through us here what you saw in the past, what the drought monitor also has to do with kind of setting the stage, if you will, for those fires. And so I've just pulled up the drought monitor right now that is active on this Wednesday night. And if I recall correctly, we'll get a new one of these every Thursday. But we can actually see that there are drought conditions abnormally or moderately dry across portions of the Carolinas. But we were just talking about Tennessee, and you can see extreme drought conditions there in portions of neighboring Tennessee, not far from that North Carolina line. So that is certainly something to keep an eye on. I know it feels like it just just rained a couple days ago, and we'll talk in a moment about what comes next. But I keep thinking about how dry it is outside, all that static electricity I have every time I touch anything.
Very cold air tends to be very dry air, and so it's no surprise that we're having the static electricity issues. Every time I pet my cat, we both get zapped. So
for something so shocking, I'm not shocked at all.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have a point, James, in that we have to have a heightened sense of awareness this spring, because we had Helene, which blew a bunch of trees down in the Appalachians.
Yeah.
If it gets dry, and that's kind of been a tendency for a while, if we haven't had a hurricane, it's been really dry in this part of the country. So if we continue to have those dry spells, if we get a long one where things really dry out and there's a lot of dry fuel available for a wildfire, and we get a really windy day, then we would be deeply concerned for a serious wildfire.
I think it was in that IBHS 500th episode special where Jared, you say, you got to pay attention to those fire weather warnings. When they get posted by the National Weather Service, take them seriously.
Right, and not just for going through the spring either. It's going to take a while for all that wood to decay. So months in advance, if we get a windy and dry day, there's going to be concern for a significant wildfire.
Pamela is watching with us here on YouTube tonight. She says, I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, and strangely, a fire started here today, ? Here's a look right now at the active fires burning in North Carolina, courtesy of the North Carolina Fire Service. Nothing too close reported, at least not yet on the map, Pamela, near Wilmington. But you guys can see we do have some relatively small fires of maybe 1 or 2 acres. And then we've also got a map from South Carolina, the Forestry Commission, 0 active fires right now to report in the state, but it does say that they had 1,144 wildfires burn 6,500 acres last year, which, you look at those numbers and I always go, that is so much more than I would have thought, because not all of them make the news. They're all various sizes, but you got to pay attention to each and every one of them because, as we've been talking about, the start of something could become something big. So how do you keep yourself and your family safe?
There
Here's
goes
what
the
IBHS
house.
recommends.
You can see the corner of the house here has ignited.
And in case you want to avoid a scenario like that, here is
in terms of
where
the
you can find more information
IBHS
from
mission. What do these real-world experiments provide scientifically?
It is real science at work, and so what we're watching today is one of our laboratory experiments that we will couple with in the field. So it's have a part of our work that does involve trying to inform building codes. Of course, that's your work in the future. So we've got that, and that's important work that we do from what we see in our research. But we also put together guidance, ready guides. We have a wildfire ready guide that's available on our website at IBHS.org that people can get their hands on. They can also look at wildfireprepared.org and see what they can start to do in their own home.
Yeah, because while in the real world, unfortunate situations like this happen, doing some of them in the lab might help head off, I would imagine, some instances in the future where if building codes could help guide safety.
And then so you can find out more information about building codes, whether they keep you and your family safe from wildfires, hurricanes, flooding. IBHS government resources available as well too. We're going to take a quick 90-second break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to these guys about scenes like this one that we saw last week in Winston-Salem. Could more be on the way? We'll be back in 90 seconds after this message from Girls Who Chase, Carolina Weather Group, proud to support their upcoming spring webinar. Take a listen.
Hi, podcast listeners. If you've ever thought to yourself, I'd love to start storm chasing, but I have no idea how to get started. Believe me, you're not alone. You can kick off your chasing adventure with Girls Who Chase on March 1st, 2025 at the Storm Chasing 101 training event we call Spring Training. The annual Spring Training event, and yes, the pun is intended, provides accessible, entry-level, and foundational information and training material for storm chasers at all levels. Spring trainees will range from those who want to begin their chase education or brush up on the basics, to more advanced chasers who want to learn more about in-depth specialized topics. Just like in baseball, we gather every spring to shake off the rust, refresh our skills, and get ready to hit a home run. Spring training is provided in partnership with the leading meteorology education organization, ComEt's MedEd program. This allows for the program to always be held virtually and remain affordable. Girls Who Chase is a global community, and we believe strongly in making science and learning accessible to everyone without the constraints of travel or financial hardship. And if you can't make it on March 1st, don't worry. All presentations will be recorded and made permanently available to registrants. To register and for information on the topics, speakers, and schedule as they become available, visit our website, girlswhochase.com/spring training. That's girlswhochase.com/spring training for more information. We hope to see you there.
Well, more information about that coming in the next few weeks. Looking forward to that. Hey, here's a live look tonight in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, courtesy of Resort Cams. The snow still on the ground there after last week's snow. And as we showed you just before break, beautiful scenes across portions of the Carolinas, such as the one we saw there in Winston-Salem. Tom Miner was helping me hold down the fort last Friday as snow was moving through the Carolinas. It was a pleasure to live chat with so many of you who were letting us know whether or not you were seeing snow or sleet or rain. Tom, we're both here in South Charlotte, and what a shocker. We got robbed again.
We totally did. You know, it was amazing. We had a viewer from Atlanta who had commented that they had 3 inches of snow on the ground. They had a huge burst in the morning. And so that actually kind of gave me a little bit of hope that, you know, as they say, if it happens in Atlanta, it's coming to Charlotte. And so we had like maybe about 5 minutes of some really nice flakes, and then that switch over to sleet and then freezing rain. We broke the snow drought, you know, broke it, but it really doesn't feel like we broke this one, even though we did.
No, we did get measurable snow at Charlotte Douglas, although I'm not sure
Yes.
I ever heard an answer on how much ice we officially got. 0.2, 0.25, something
Right.
like
It was
that.
somewhere in that range.
Somewhere out there in the range. The other thing that gave me hope, Frank, was that early burst of winter weather you guys got in the morning hours. I thought, oh man, Columbia's overachieving. This is going to be fun.
Right.
No, we didn't overachieve. Oh, the overachieving in Columbia. You're funny, James.
No.
No, the place that kind of overachieved was over in the Central Savannah River area, Augusta, Aiken, that general area. You remember waking up that morning and oh God, look at how bright the reflectivity is on radar over there.
Sure.
And then you look at the obs, and a little later in the morning they had almost a half inch of rain in an hour, liquid equivalent in an hour. And I'm thinking, oh God, the roads must be horrible over there. It actually was mixed stuff, so they didn't get only had like an inch of snow with a bunch of sleet and some freezing rain too. But that was kind of eye popping to see that much precipitation, liquid equivalent, coming down over there, and some of it was snow. I think it was about an inch, and then again some sleet on top of that. And then they had a glacier for a while because of the freezing rain on top of that. That kind of turned it all into cement. But by the time it got to Columbia, well, it was sleet for a while, a few hours. Some snow did mix in briefly.
It did.
I'm trying to find the one picture I took that has like one snowflake on my cat's back to share with you. I'll see if I can find it here in a minute.
Right. Didn't want to overdo it. You know, it'd been like 3 years. We had a
in Columbia we had our requisite 8 to 16 flakes of snow, and then the storm went over to freezing rain, and because it was coming during the daytime, it didn't really accrete very much. I think I measured 3/100ths of an inch of ice accretion in my backyard. And then by the late evening, I think it even got, or late in the afternoon, it got above freezing. So it was just plain rain for a while. And everything really just melted. So there were parts of the Midlands that did have a substantial ice buildup, but not around my place.
Well, we know Scotty Powell and Myrtle Beach got some sleet. Jared, did you guys get sleet down there in Charleston?
Yeah, I had a few pings of sleet off of my car. I was actually coming back from a doctor appointment, and it started, the precipitation started bouncing, and it's like, all right, well, yeah, there's the sleet. We actually had an ice situation not too far inland from where I am. We started to see some of the overpasses take on some ice. We had parts of the tail race bridge were actually over the tail race canal were actually closed for time. Because of ice building up there. There were reports of accidents on I-95 and I-26, people sliding off the road. So in a bit of a sense, we did have a little bit of an overachievement with the icing on our end. But yes, later in the day, turned all into rain. We were very happy to see those thermometers finally head north of 32. That was it hung on a little longer than I think any of us wanted to. And it was, just a kind of a rainy, dreary night, just a raw day in general. But it was kind of fun to see a couple sleet pellets. Had a little burst of sleet at my place, but nothing really to write home about. It was just a very chilly day.
Yeah.
And, so it goes.
I mean, there were places in the Carolinas, once again, north of Interstate 85, that did get 1, 2, 3 inches of snow. I appreciate this time lapse from Winston-Salem. I like watching the tire tracks appear in the road there over the course of time. Tom, you know a thing or two about traffic crashes and people traveling on the road. I like what Brad Panovich posted on social. He said, when you people learn how to drive in the summer, we'll talk about driving.
Yes, right. Yeah. I was doing some traffic coverage for Greensboro and Raleigh and in the Winston-Salem area, and there were a number of accidents throughout the day. You saw it there on the picture there with the tire tracks. We don't know how to drive in the snow yet. Bless our hearts. We're doing our best, but yeah, we still have a ways to go there. It's a beautiful image, though. I mean, just to see the snow.
I'll just loop it.
Absolutely. Yes, please. I just want to keep watching that. I was happy for them. I was vicariously living through this. But yeah, got to be safe and careful on those roads.
Yeah.
Another thing, too, I know there were a lot of areas that had kind of that fog and that mist, sort of that freezing drizzle throughout portions of South Carolina as well. So you can never be too safe, especially in conditions like this.
Yeah. Actually, it looks like people aren't doing too bad there. I don't see any skid marks or people spinning off into the sidewalk on the opposite side of the road or anything. So it looks like people were
Frank, it's only one
being
intersection.
careful and
only one spot.
Being competent, as competent as we Southerners can be when we try to drive in the snow.
Right.
Either that, or maybe they're all Yankees that moved down here, or people that spent a lot of time up north like I did. I have to try not to get overconfident, though, if it ever snows in Columbia again and I have to drive in it. It's like it's been years since I've had to drive in the snow, so I might have forgotten how.
Well, here's what the NOAA folks are kind of giving us as an early indicator of what could happen in about 7 days from now. It kind of puts us in that somewhere between 10 and 30% chance that we could see winter weather. What does that mean? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But Frank, it strikes me that the chance of seeing winter weather is, as of now, subject to change, slightly higher to the south than to the north.
Yes, it is, and it's because the storm track looks like it's going to be fairly far to the south. This is not to say that we have the greatest handle. Either the folks at WPC or anybody else, for that matter, have the best handle, because our model guidance is not all that great a week out, as we found out with the storm back on Friday.
Are you sure? Because I thought we just took a single model run and posted it to social like it was the Bible. I thought that was
right. That's what you're supposed to do is take the snowfall plot out of the 6Z GFS.
Check the weather app on your phone.
Oh my
for hour 360.
Yeah.
And post that saying, lock it in, people.
10-to-1 ratio. Make
Big
it so.
storm on the way.
To everyone who is looking at Apple weather, you are not getting 13 inches of snow. I don't know why it's telling you that. It's wrong.
Wishful thinking, but it is wrong.
The Apple weather app.
I don't even think that's wishful thinking, Tom. That's like destructive thinking.
It probably is. We just want some snow. Apple's trying to.
Does it still say it, Tom? Does it still say it?
Let's see here. Yeah, it's up there. This now it says 8 inches of snow.
Oh, okay.
That's
much better.
For Tuesday,
I don't know if I even have that crap app on my iPhone.
It's the default one, isn't it?
No, you can remove it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I
think I did. I think I junked it.
Yeah, I think the thing that that we need to keep, that everybody should keep in mind, with winter weather in the South, the first rule is that you listen to the humans and not the apps. The apps don't know. The apps are using the same computer data that we are trying to build a human-based forecast from, and it's a windshield wiper. The GFS a day ago was, painting quite a snowy and icy scenario for my part of the world, and today it's building in dry high pressure, and there's nothing. So there's still a lot of model disagreement there, and these apps that that don't use weather service data, that don't use human curated forecasts, are going to lead you to the bad place. So again, listen to the humans, listen to the experts. Time to put the apps aside. This is not a time for the apps.
When you said bad place, I don't know why I got a flashback to the NBC sitcom The Good Place.
Yeah, it's like some apps can be okay for an overview and not a crazy active weather pattern like might happen next week. If you just on days where there might be a thunderstorm, or it might rain, or it might be sunny, the apps are probably good enough for that. but you don't want them leading you when there's going to be a severe weather outbreak or potentially a winter storm or a hurricane. It's just not enough information for you.
We got a lot of questions, and Tom, you may have saw them during our stream on Friday too, but people being like, but why are weather apps so bad, right? Because they kept saying, like, where is this 8 inches of snow? And I didn't have this analogy at the time. I'm going to try it on now for the first time, and if it's bad, I'm never going to use it again. But if you had 10 friends, and like one's really into sports, and one's really into literature, and one's really into cars, and you're like, oh, I have a sports question. I should go ask the sports guy. Oh, I've got a car question. I should go ask the car guy. But you're not going to go to the car guy to ask a sports question and so on and so forth. And these weather models all have like their different strengths and their own different personalities. But it takes that human forecaster to kind of help you go, oh, wait, no, that's the one I need to listen to this time. Or no, wait, this is the guy who's going to actually know what's happening in this scenario, as opposed to just going to me and asking me who's going to win the Super Bowl when I couldn't even name 3 football teams. Like that would not make sense. That's my thought on that.
That's a good one.
Well, a lot of the
Needs some
problem with the
refinement, I
apps,
think.
like you said, I think it was Jarrett that said they're just using raw model data and pulling that directly into the app, and that's not great. That's no way to run a forecast. Even if you pull an ensemble means in there, it's still no way to run a forecast. You do need human involvement, and some of the better known apps, the Weather Channel app and AccuWeather and so forth, some of them do have people behind the scenes looking at the forecast. So some of those are going to be okay at least, but like I said, when there's a big event, you want to go local. Pay attention to the weather service, pay attention to your local media, the people who have to live through the weather they're forecasting, and that's going to give you your best stuff, your best forecast.
One thing we know for sure is it's going to get really cold. Ooh. Here's a look at the coldest nighttime temperatures over the course of the next week or so from, as Frank mentioned, the National Weather Service. Actually, that's not even right. It's going to get even colder than that, isn't it? So let me scroll on through here. I think I got to manually operate.
Saturday morning's lows, yeah.
Yeah, right. So here we go. We got 20s. Let's see. Where is our lowest low? I think it's going to be, here's a 17 in Charlotte, 14 in Hickory, 3 in Boone.
Wow.
Raleigh 15, Hatteras 25, Wilmington 20, and not to be outdone, Cherokee at 6, and that is valid for Tuesday. Those are the low temperatures on Tuesday. South Carolina, yours animates, and I'm going to go ahead and screen share it now, and you can kind of just see it playing on through. Low temperatures over the course of the next week. Those are 70s.
Way out of date.
Those are way wrong.
That is, that's not even highs.
I'm going to South Carolina. It seems great there right now.
Oh yeah.
Except that's more like Puerto Rico weather right now.
What is
we turned on the global warming machine a little harder for
us.
Oh,
this page is outdated and no longer maintained. Please update your bookmarks.
Okay,
wait. Can I update my bookmarks? Oh, hey, hi.
There you go.
Here we go. Hey. Statewide maps are here. You guys are watching this live. Here we go. Oh, this looks very similar. Okay. All right, here we go again. 20s and 30s. Ooh, a little 40s, guys. That's going to be like tropical. These are nighttime lows.
We're going to get a relatively warm spell for maybe 24 hours.
Yeah. So here's Monday night, Tuesday morning.
Wow.
We got upper teens, I-85 corridor, maybe into Rock Hill, 20s there.
And that's
Columbia.
only the first taste of it. I mean, it looks like all next week and next weekend is going to be real cold. So
yeah, because it sticks around for a couple of days, right? Like
that may not be the coldest weather we get.
Yeah.
We'll
be back next
Depends on what happens with the winter storm, and how big it is and how serious it is.
Right. Snowpack will have a big impact on that if snowpack actually is there.
If we end up getting a big snowstorm, snow is very effective at radiating heat out into space. So if you have deep snow cover and a clear, calm night, it's going to get really, really cold.
WCNC did a story today. They interviewed Duke. You guys remember 2022 Christmas Eve when we got down to like wind chill 8 here in Charlotte and we started having rolling blackouts? As of today, Duke says we're fine. Nothing to worry about for next week, which is what I would expect them to say.
As of today.
Ask me again tomorrow, Magic 8.
Right.
Yeah.
I know whose power is going to be going out first if there needs to be brownouts.
Mine. It's okay. Since 2022, we now have a working fireplace. So That will help keep
that's
us
probably
warm.
a good choice.
That is probably a good choice. A couple more comments as we wrap things up here tonight. Going back to our fire conversation, we were talking earlier in the show about the Gatlinburg fire. Weather Watcher on YouTube, the Gatlinburg fire was a huge eye opener, and Shannon saying the Gatlinburg fire was a big wake up call. And I know I visited a couple years later, and the scars are still there.
I believe it.
Yeah. I pray the gods will help keep Western North Carolina safe from any fires. Says this folks, Tiny Loves watching on YouTube. I think that's a cat in the thumbnail, and Frank likes cats. Frank, did you have a cat photo you wanted to share with us?
I finally found the picture of my cat who spent 30 seconds outside in the snow.
Well, that's about
before
as long
she
as the snow
doped all of
lasted.
that and went right back in. But actually, both the cats were out there briefly, but they came back in. So anyway, yeah, that picture in the thumbnail there is Florence the cat, just outside my back door with approximately 8 snowflakes on her back.
Look.
Yeah. It's not dandruff, guys. That's snow.
It's a trace of
Yes,
snow.
those are actual snowflakes. And it's actually a little south of Columbia, South Carolina, where we live now.
Wow.
Does that cat count as a Kokorot's gauge? Could you submit that as like a trace of snow on my cat? Didn't
How many
If
cats
I
of
were a
snow did we
Kokorot's
get?
observer, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, you're not? I'm going to tell Melissa.
Oh, yeah, she's trying to talk me into it. Speak of the devil, look who just popped in.
Hey. What did you think of the snow? Would you like more?
Yeah.
No?
She hated it.
Yeah. Well, that's just the cat reaction to everything, Frank. And
So
the
she
toddler
has a much
reaction
more
to-
favorable reaction to tuna.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Well,
And salmon.
if we start getting any wind of any wintry weather, we need to keep you informed about, and it's not yet next Wednesday night. You can find us right here, wherever it is you're subscribed to the Carolina Weather Group, which we hope is YouTube or maybe Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Those are my favorite to promote. I did recently rewatch our 2017 best of, and we were promoting apps like Stitcher. That was cute. And Google Plus. That was cute. And depending on what the Supreme Court decides to do, maybe TikTok. We'll find out. So, but I do think that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Carolina Weather Group. And it's good, as always, to talk to you guys, Jared, Frank, Tom. Appreciate your time. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. We'll see you again, especially if, snow. We'll see.
Could happen. No
We'll see.
guarantees.
No
promises.
guarantees
This is,
at
after
all.
the Carolinas are the Carolinas.
Yeah.
Yes, I bought a
the three
subscription to
inevitabilities
Grammarly today.
The 3 inevitabilities: death, taxes, and the warm nose.
Oh,
Look for that coming soon to our merch store, courtesy of Weather Daddy.
Yeah, that's a good one. You would think that somebody like James Spann would have thought of that before we did.
Don't give him ideas. This man's got enough. Okay. I'm going to roll the credits now.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
bye, everybody.